Good morning. With today's ringing of our peace bowl, and in accordance with our Unitarian Universalist first principle of honoring the inherent worth and dignity of all people, we pay tribute to Black History Month. In doing so, we recognize the value and importance of affording respect, equal rights, and equal opportunity to all of our fellow Americans. Thanks for bearing with us, folks, during this moment, this unusual Sunday that we're having. That was the Alvin Ailey Dance Company, and I probably watched that video about 15 times. I just love it. Good morning to all of you hardy souls out there who have made it through these last 5 days of stormy, windy, rainy, sunny, unpredictable weather. Welcome to Granite Peak Unitarian Universalist Congregation. I'm Bobby Bollinger, your worship associate this morning. Our minister, the Reverend Patty Willis, is on sabbatical for the month of February, but she will be back in the pulpit with us this coming Sunday. We are glad that you are with us, and it's good to be together this morning. And we thank you for your understanding of the need to cancel our in-person service this morning and meet on Zoom only due to technical and weather issues. We were unable to get Wi-Fi in the building yesterday. It is our plan to gather again in person next Sunday. We'll begin this morning with the mission statement of our congregation. We are a compassionate spiritual community that celebrates diversity, nurtures the personal and spiritual growth of all ages, shares our gifts, promotes justice for all, and serves the world we live in. After the service this morning, we'll be able to go into breakout rooms for socialization and to catch up with one another. I see that Joe and Peter are back with us this morning. It'll be good to talk with you. Welcome home. Additionally, today's guest minister, Reverend Johnson, has agreed to stay in a breakout room as well, if you'd like to talk with him about his message or anything else. If you are with us for the first time this morning and would like more information on our congregation, it is available on our website at prescottuu.org. We really thank our tech assistant this morning, Deidre Schwartz, who is producing this service from her home way out in Williamson Valley. We also thank our video guest, Marianne Erickson, our speaker, Robert Chagog, and our office administrator, Tracy Powers, for their help and flexibility in making this morning's service happen. And most particularly, we are pleased to be joined in the pulpit today by the Reverend Anthony Mtuaswa Johnson, the minister for the past year and a half at the Sedona Unitarian Universalist Fellowship, just over the mountain. He is broadcasting from home this morning as well. Reverend Johnson was born in Mississippi, raised in Chicago, and besides being an ordained UU minister, he also wears many hats as speaker, writer, poet, producer, soldier, teacher, mentor, Tai Chi practitioner, and elder. He has served in a variety of capacities at congregations in Bayside and Sacramento, California, as well as in Phoenix. His ministry is dedicated to removing unconscious bias from the soil of the soul. We are honored to have you with us, Reverend Johnson. In addition to the announcements that we're showing on the screen before the service, you may read about the many other things that are going on at Granite Peak in the Weekly Peak newsletter, our website, and in Reverend Patty's videos, which will resume soon. Just a quick reminder that our free congregational dinner is coming up this Saturday evening, so please pay attention to Marianne Erickson's video that's coming up just in a few minutes regarding that. And our rummage sale is just 2 weeks from now, March 13th through 18th. So think about purging those unwanted items and bringing them here, where they'll have the chance to find a new home for the benefit of Granite Peak. We love our families with children, and Sundays when our building is open, Sandra Palacios, our Faith Development Coordinator, teaches ages 5 and older in our Faith Development building. We also have a nursery each week for kids under the age of 5. We include in our services each week the Unitarian Universalist tradition of lighting the chalice. We light this chalice in memory of the courage of those who have struggled for freedom, the persistence of those who have struggled for justice, and the love of those who have built beloved communities to carry on the light of hope. With Black History Month being honored during February, our music this morning will include a variety of African American spirituals, songs that have endured through the ages and were often used by enslaved people to lift their spirits and to communicate important information. A longtime favorite is Swing Low, Sweet Chariot, which, like many spirituals, speaks clearly to the strength, longing, and faith of many men and women who were forced into slavery. I will go ahead with the reading of the covenant. If you can join me by memory, please do. Love is the doctrine of this congregation. The quest for truth is sacrament, and service is its prayer. To dwell together in peace, to seek knowledge in freedom, to serve others in community, thus do we covenant together. Our plan now was to have a stewardship moment hearing from Marianne Erickson, and that too is scheduled to be on video. And
I think, can you hear me, Bobby?
yes, I can.
I think the videos are what's causing some bandwidth issues. So maybe we'll just skip the videos and go into the important stuff, which I know is the readings and the service discussion. So why don't we do that?
Okay, and perhaps at the end of the service, Marianne could give her stewardship message. We'll see if that's possible. We will move on, folks. Hang in there. We'll get this service done. We'll move on right now to joys and sorrows. Our beloved community is the heart and soul of Granite Peak. Each week, many of us experience personal joys and sorrows. Let's take a brief time of meditation to silently acknowledge the joys and concerns in our hearts and in our minds. We collectively send our love to Kathleen Schaefer, whose husband Terry passed away at home this week after a long illness. And we hold Karen and Merle Hagberg and their family in our hearts as they grieve the loss of their daughter and sibling, Sarah Bergeson. And we collectively wish good health and the very best to Mike and Joanne Fogel as they settle into their new home at Las Fuentes. May our joys and concerns be enveloped in love and caring by our beloved community. So may it be. Let's sing together without the slide, walking with you. Walking with you. Walking with you is my prayer. When we are meeting in person, this is the time in our service when we take up our offering. In doing so, we acknowledge the feeling of connection and community that we experience here with one another each week. May we be reminded that our building expenses, staff salaries, and programs are supported by your generosity. The link for giving during this service is in our Zoom chat, or you may donate through a link on our website. In support of local nonprofits, we also give back to the greater community through our monthly Seeds of Support program. February's recipient is Hungry Kids. You may read about them in your order of service. We acknowledge the generosity of spirit expressed through your offerings and thank you for your support of our beloved community. Blessed be. And now, to further our understanding of the Black experience, let's hear from our own Robert Shagog as he tells us about the talk. Welcome, Robert.
Welcome. Thank you. This reading is a collection of internet posts and words from Marianne Wright Edelman, past executive director of the National Children's Defense Fund and an author of several books about children. Every parent dreams that their child will grow up with a good self-esteem, safe, and strong. In order for each of these goals to be met, parents have to provide a home, continuous food, a passion for life, a discovery of a higher power. Every young person of color must learn to navigate a world full of segregation, discrimination, and hate groups whose goal is your demise. Therefore, parents of color must give their children the talk. The talk is a prepping of our children for the realities of society full of racism. The talk is associated with the talk about the birds and the bees. The talk, however, is ongoing and different with every situation. I have been given the talk on my first day of school, whenever I was a guest in someone's home, when traveling. When I was a senior in college, a group of friends and I decided to go to Fort Lauderdale for spring break. Before we could leave the state, my friends had to meet my mother, and she gave them a lecture on how to protect her son. And she gave me a speech on how to act in the South. This was not the first time that I heard such a speech. About 10 years earlier, she would not allow me to travel south to visit family because I quote, "You don't know how to act in the South." This was about 8 years after the killing of Emmett Till. On a certain level, the talk is universal. Every parent on the planet has to figure out how to raise their children to have fun and not be stressed out, and yet be aware of the real world. In churches, older Blacks are teaching younger Blacks how to talk, walk, dress, and to be mindful of their surroundings and how others may perceive them. Some whites in position of authority feel threatened by an afro, dreadlocks, or the size of young Black males. Some parents use old TV shows to start the talk. Clips from shows like In the Heat of the Night, The Jeffersons, and The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air are used to start the discussion on how to act in given situation. Some people are going to have negative reactions just seeing you, regardless of what you say or do. The talk is also an opportunity to build up children's sense of pride by exploring the riches of whatever culture they come from. Building up self-confidence is an important aspect of the talk. There is no perfect formula for how to give the talk. Some things that are good to be included in a talk are pride in one's race and culture, the importance of hard work, promoting other races, and the value of interracial interaction. Regardless of the method, the lessons of the talk stay with people throughout their lives. Mama used to say to me, if something bad is happening, then vote with your feet, leave, go in the other direction. Two things that kicks back to me over the decades is to be cautious and calm. Comedian Chris Rock has a YouTube video entitled 10 Things Not to Do If You're Stopped by the Police or You're Gonna Die. It's funny, but not really. The loss of young Blacks by police and gun violence keeps growing. Black people of color must work twice as hard or more to survive and to gain real success. You can see this when you listen to inner city kids talk, saying, if I get to middle school, or if I get to high school. The rate of violent deaths in inner cities is 42% among Blacks ages 10 to 29. I was blessed to grow up in a small town where the expectation and support was high. I am sure that white parents talk to their children about being polite and well-behaved, but the children of color can literally lose their lives. White young people who have been raised with entitlement by accident of birth, some are not aware of their privilege. These young people and their parents need to be reminded that the world they face is already 2/3 non-white, that every day our nation and our world is becoming a mosaic of greater diversity. In the American labor force, only 1 out of 8 workers are white. As our fate becomes more and more intertwined and non-English speaking people of color, the world's survival will depend on the awareness and respect of other races and cultures. We all need the talk. Thank you.
Thank you, Robert, for that moving message. Let it just soak in for a moment here. Something that we all need to hear. And now we turn our pulpit over to Reverend Anthony Johnson for his message entitled Of Bone and Sinew. Welcome, Reverend Johnson.
Thank you, Bobby. Thank you, Robert, for your words. Thank you, everyone, for being here. As I like to say, there are a lot of places you could be. You chose to be here, and for that, we are grateful. So good morning, if I may say so, on behalf of Granite Peak Unitarian Universalist Congregation. As mentioned, I am the Reverend Anthony Mtuaswa Johnson, currently serving as minister at the Sedona Unitarian Universalist Fellowship in Sedona, Arizona. So I welcome you in the name of the ancestors. Upon the shoulders I stand, or on this Sunday I sit, as we come together in this technology we call Zoom. Yeah. But know that it's a pleasure and an honor to be able to share this space on this beautiful Sunday, stormy, snowy Sunday in Arizona. Today's sermon is, as aforementioned, entitled Of Bone and Sinew. And I want to own that I kidnapped that title, if you will, from the words of William Craft, half of the partnership that we're going to get to know a little bit, if you don't already know. But to me, this is just one of the amazing true stories of the amazing journey of African Americans between the 15th and the 19th century through this peculiar institution known as American slavery. William and Ellen were, I call them, brave and fervent warriors. They were warriors for love, and they were warriors for justice. As I mentioned, that's such a unique American story. When I read the story, when I first read the story of William and Ellen Craft, it resonated in my bones. I felt it, and I'll share some of the words from William. And I took the liberty of changing slavery or slaves to enslaved people. Because it's like I tell some of my friends when I talk about reproductive rights, and women refer to themselves as, well, I'm pregnant. And I also offer, you were impregnated. You know, that stuff didn't fall from a tree. So there's two ways to look at that. No one is born a slave. You were enslaved. There is a system, there are laws. William said, it is true that our conditions as enslaved people were not by any means the worst, as we will discover a little later about William referring to himself. But the thought that we could not call the bones and the sinew that God gave us as our own, and above all, that the fact that another man had the power to tear from the cradle the newborn babe and sell it as it was shambles like a brute, and then scourge us if we dared to lift a finger to save it from such a fate. This haunted us for years. End of quote. So Ellen and William, their pursuit of happiness, of freedom, led to what I call an adventurous escape from this perpetual haunting. A haunting to honor their natural desire to experience the love of each other. This is a love story. They refuse to have their children born. Let me rephrase that if I could, make it a positive. They insisted that their children be born free, free bone, free sinew, as free human beings. So their story is just but one of the many love stories caught in the grips again of that peculiar institution known as American slavery. I emphasize American slavery. You know, slavery's been around a long time. As best I can tell in my research, always a part of all human history. I remind folks, you know, Moses was a slave. Spartacus was a slave. But this one was a unique one, because you could be a slave, but you could be what? A great warrior. You could marry a princess. You might be a great sculptor. You might do something and put that onus badge to the side. Oh, but not this one. Based upon that, little different, major different. So the true story of William and Ellen, and I'm going to throw in here what I call a turning point in their lives, and something that I think will resonate with everyone watching this morning, is their relationship with one Unitarian Universalist minister by the name of one Theodore Parker, is a part of our story this morning. And I offer that relationship with Minister Parker could serve as a template for our racial situation in America today. It's the same old story. New day, same story. Same but different, different and the same. But for a moment, I'd ask you to imagine what that haunting felt like as best you can. Knowing that your newborn child sleeping next to you could be, get this phrase, legally snatched from you at any moment. legally snatched from you at any moment. So in my head, I see from the 15th to the 19th century, in a way, it was like being an orphan. You could be an orphan at any moment. It was like being an orphan in a community of orphans. And for many generations. And orphans who may actually know who their mother was or is, but had no way to do anything about that, or had their mother snatched from them or been snatched from her, vice versa, at a moment's notice or with no notice at all. In a way, you see, their feelings did not matter. They didn't matter. After all, they were not people. We were not people. We were commodities. We were property. So it was in this world that William Craft and Ellen lived. William, as he mentioned earlier, had things not so bad because he had a talent. William was a cabinet maker. And that's allowed him a certain amount of small f freedom. And he actually got paid and earned a little bit of money, gave him a little autonomy compared to most enslaved people at the time. And Ellen worked as what was called at that time a lady's slave, meaning she worked direct for the master's wife. And we'll find out why she had such a job a little later. Because this was a position of favoritism within the white household. And so it was during this time as they were alive in 1848. You see, and if you were a good slave, and every year at Christmas time, you would get a couple of days off. So it was at Christmas time in 1848 that William and Ellen were allowed to take a trip to the neighboring town. But they had been plotting and saving their money for years, not having children and planning their great escape, saving their money in a special little basket that they buried, saving that money for years until this particular Christmas in 1848. So using the money they had saved, I want you to really get this one. They bought first-class tickets and boarded a train in Savannah, Georgia. How did they do that? Since we're on Zoom, and y'all probably can't be unmuted, so I'm going to play crazy and keep on rolling, but I usually pause. And so how the heck do you think they did that? How in the heck did they buy first-class tickets? You know they could not read or write by law. We're not supposed to have any money by law. To be able to read or write was against the law. I see somebody's read the story. Oh, Marianne Erickson, bless your wonderful soul. Or maybe not, but you guessed it. You hit it right on the head. So they couldn't buy tickets. Earlier I mentioned how Ellen got that job, because Ellen, and excuse me, but I'm gonna pick on you, Bobby. Ellen looked just like you. She could, and I say that because I have aunties who look like you. in my own family. My mother tells me the story when I was 3 years old. And my aunties came from Gulfport, Mississippi to visit us in Hattiesburg. And I ran up to her and pulled on her dress and said, Mommy, Mommy, who's those white ladies? What are they doing here? And my mama said, Anthony, those are your aunties. And I went, whoa, whoa. So yeah, we got all, if you don't know, in the Black community, you got all shades and those who, what we call pass for white. So Ellen could pass for white. She was light-skinned. So she and William traveled first class, posing as master and slave. But now you know these were the days of, dare I say, supreme patriarchy. So somebody looking like Robert could not travel with Bobby under any circumstances. So I'll make a long story short. Ellen had to transform herself not only to a white person, but a white male. In dress, in persona, in attitude, and in being. She had to become a he, and a white he at that. Hey, but one small detail. Ellen could not write. How was she going to sign for the tickets or sign in at an inn or do anything? Well, she did what my other mother-in-law always told me what folks do. They take what they got and they make what they want. So bless her soul, she traveled as a sick white man with a broken right arm. So she had her right arm in a sling, which she said, therefore, I cannot sign my name. Is that creative or is that creative? And bless their soul, with her faithful enslaved husband, they traveled 1,000 miles and it worked. Traveled by first-class train and steamboat through the coast of South Carolina, North Carolina, Virginia, Washington, D.C., and Maryland, arriving in Philadelphia on Christmas Day in 1848. There they spent 3 weeks with a Quaker family that fed them, gave them love, gave them shelter, took them in like family. They continued their trek on to Boston. It was here they met and were boarded at the boarding house of one Lewis Hayden. Hayden was a Black man who owned a hotel in Boston, which served as one of the main stops on the other railroad, which we know as the Underground Railroad. The Underground Railroad. And they stayed there with Mr. Hayden for a while. William found him a job as a cabinet maker. Ellen started working as a seamstress. But this is around 1850. There was a law passed in 1850. Anybody want to type in the old chat box what law that might be in 1850?
Fugitive slave law.
That's right. Somebody said, yeah. The owners of that property had the right to go get that property. The fugitive slave law. So the slave catchers came to Boston. And I love history because we know their names. Willis Hughes and John Knight came to Boston in search of William and Ellen Craft to bring that property back to its proper owner. But the Black folks and the white folks in Boston came together and say, we're not having it. That's what happened. They formed something called the Boston Vigilance Committee. The Boston Vigilance Committee, whose mission was, quote, to secure the colored inhabitants of Boston from any invasion of their rights. Now, to me, they were saying, indeed, Black Lives Matter.
Mhm.
So as the story goes, the Boston Vigilance Committee, the members transported Ellen, they snatched him up. Ellen and Bill, we're going to take you to somewhere, sure enough safe. We're going to take you to the home of this Unitarian minister, Theodore Parker. So Minister Parker had heard that the enslaved people catchers had threatened to break into his house at night to bring Ellen and William back. But he was determined to keep them out. So Reverend Parker kept a loaded pistol at the ready. Now, many ministers were mad at Theodore because what was he doing? He was breaking the law. Remember, when we remember that's a big one. When we hear a lot about systemic law and about racism. Let me do I conduct what I call, my mission is removing bias from the heart of the soul, the soil of the soul, when I conduct multicultural workshops. And quick distinction that racism ain't white folks hating black folks or black folks hating white folks. Anybody can do that, and I have a technical term for that. That's called an asshole. Anybody can do that. We're talking about racism. Example by law, the laws I've been talking, the laws, the customs that led to the myths and stereotypes that live in your head and in your body to this day. So Theodore Parker kept that loaded gun and was breaking the law. Share a quote from the good Reverend. Here's what he said. He said, I have in my church Black men and women, fugitive enslaved people. They are the crown of my apostleship. The seal of my ministry. It becomes me to look after their bodies in order to save their souls. This fugitive slave law has brought us into the most important and intimate conversation and connection with the sin of slavery. I have been obliged to take my own parishioners into my house to keep them out of the clutches of the kidnapper. Yes, gentlemen, I have been obliged to do that. And then to keep my doors guarded by day as well by night. Yes, I've had to arm myself. I've written my sermons with my loaded pistol at my desk and ready for action. Yes, with a drawn sword within reach of my right hand. This I have done in Boston in the middle of the 19th century. Been obliged to do it to defend the members of my own church, women as well as men. End of quote. Theodore said, this I have done in Boston in the middle of the 19th century. So what is our congregational response? What are we being called upon to do in the 21st century? Here's my question. for your consideration. As our denominations face the deep-seated perpetual haunting of white supremacy. In our ongoing efforts to create this beloved community, the famous quote of Parker comes back again. Y'all recognize this quote, I know. I do not pretend to understand the moral universe. The arc is a long one. My eyes reach but little ways. I cannot calculate the curve and complete the figure by the experience of sight. I can't get to it by seeing it, but I can divine it. I can divine it by conscience. And from what I see, I am sure it bends towards justice. That's been attributed to somebody else. That's Reverend Parker. Let me give you another gem of history. There's another famous Parker quote that's been attributed to someone else. You may have heard something about, it goes something like, by the people, of the people, by the people, and for the people. That's attributed to some president with a big tall hat. Wasn't Abe Lincoln first? It was that same fellow I just mentioned, that Unitarian Universalist Minister, Theodore Parker. He's also the same guy who married the Crafts. The Crafts had already jumped a broom in an African-American ceremony, but Theodore hooked them up with a good old UU ceremony, even though they'd been living as man and wife for a long time. But here's a small issue. Remember I said earlier that they insisted their children would be born in a country, in a land where their bones and their sinew would be free. America did not qualify. We were a land of slave laws and slave catchers, not a free. So guess what? William and Ellen had to keep on going. They had to keep on going on their adventurous journey. So they saved up their money, cabinet making and making dresses for enough money to get on a boat to go to Liverpool, England, where they could have their children in a free country. Pretty amazing. Took them 2 years of planning to conjure up and get that money. So they went from Portland, Maine to Nova Scotia, finally to Liverpool. In my mind's eye, I can picture what was called then the 1851 Great Exposition. It was like a World's Fair. And they were guests and put up on the dais, look, slaves from America. They were like stars at the Great Exhibition of 1851. They had the great scientific accomplishments of the time, and there were the crafts from America, slaves from that place. Okay, or it's former enslaved people, I should say. By the way, speaking of industry and the exhibition, William and Ellen represented and are representatives of the largest industry in the United States. I want you to never forget that the industry of slavery was larger than all the banking, the manufacturing, the production of all the businesses in the United States combined. Way beyond folks liking folks. So, assets combined. So needless to say, I'm doing my commercial for what another great Unitarian Universalist called reparative justice. And until that reality I shared with you is dealt with in an amicable way, until reparative justice is on the table, our country shall never be free. It shall never be whole. And I don't know about you, but I want to be whole. Want my grandchildren to be whole. But that's a sermon for another day. Because that deserves its own space and time. But William and Ellen are now two free people. Yeah. And they saying, God save the Queen. To thank heaven for having escaped from the enslaved people catchers. And they began, and they just had their babies and living in England. And I'll tell a personal quick note, but they came, eventually they had to come back. They came back and continued to have their family in the United States. They said, looked at each other one day and said, honey, we got to go back. We have a fight there. We can't just stay here in England eating crumpets and drinking tea. Our people are catching hell. We got to go back and do our part. So what do you think the chances of me in 2020 getting an email from a young lady who says, hi, Reverend, I see you're doing a sermon on the crafts. I am the great-great-granddaughter of William and Ellen Crafts. Because I have a Google alert on my computer. So whenever someone's doing a story on them, I get an alert. I live in Oakland, California. Maybe someday I was in Bayside, Humboldt County. Maybe I'll come up and see you one day if I'm ever that way. And you know what I did? Excuse me? Come up. Where do you live? I'm coming to see you now. Are you telling me that you are the great-great-great-grandson of the daughter of those people? So that's all I can talk about that, or I won't be able to continue this sermon. So needless to say, I went to meet that woman, and she's still in my life to this day. It was unbelievable, unbelievable. So the poet in me imagines the following, that William and Ellen hearts rang out. Black lives matter, 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 do matter. So be like matter and don't scatter. Gather hearts that will not tatter. Never mind this dissonant chatter. We know we are different fruit. But I know we're from the same cosmic batter. So touch your heart for me. Let's do a little something together. Everybody out there got a heart. So take your right hand and just pop, pop, pop. And let's go out together like this, if you would. Come on. I know I can't hear it, but I can see it. Thank you. Repeat after me if you would be so kind. There is only one nation, the nation of the heart. There is only one class, the class of the heart. There is only one gender, the gender of the heart. There's really only one race, the race of the heart. May it be so, blessed be. Amen. Ashe.
Thank you, thank you, thank you, Reverend Johnson. It's always a pleasure to have you with us. We hope you'll join us in the pulpit again, and I suspect many people will want to stay and speak with you in the chat room following the service. Our
My
closing-
pleasure and honor. My pleasure and honor.
Wonderful. We were to close the service with another African American spiritual. We haven't heard any of them this morning, and I'm sorry that we weren't able to enhance our service with this wonderful, wonderful music. But technical difficulties kept us from doing that, so we will move along. Marianne Erickson, I'm wondering if you would be comfortable, if we could unmute Marianne and have her give her stewardship moment, since we weren't able to present that on the video. Is that possible, Deidre? And Marianne, am I putting you totally on the spot?
Yes, yes, I did. She's unmuted now.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thanks. In the chat, I have placed the invitation for next Saturday's annual congregational dinner at the center beginning at 5 p.m. In the chat, it explains the dinner menu, the two choices between chicken breast or the gluten-free pasta and green beans. It's a vegetable primavera. The dessert will be one with wheat, that's the peach cobbler, gluten-free cookies, and vegan chocolate cupcakes. Please sign up by Wednesday, March the 1st, actually at noon, by calling Tracy Powers or emailing her at the Granite Peak UU at Gmail email address, or calling the number at the office, 928-541-0000. Or if that fails, contact me before Wednesday noon when we have to turn in our final numbers to the caterer. I hope you can join us for great food, friends, fun, and our annual celebration of our beloved community. Thank you.
Thanks, Marianne. Our closing words come to us today from English poet Ellen Iasire. About it, she wrote, "This poem isn't only for Black people. It is for everyone and anyone. I hope this poem speaks to you as it did when I wrote it. Let's have a change of heart." Her poem is Dreaming for a World Without Racism. When I think of peace, I see myself in a world where I can truly be myself, who I choose to be, where I can just let go and be comfortable with who I am. A world with no hatred, racism, or pain. A world where no one is judged or criticized. A place with equality and value of people's lives. A time of joy and togetherness where no one is thought of as good or evil. Where creed or color is not looked at as right or wrong, good or bad, where no one is offensive, cruel, or rude. A place that makes it possible to stay in a good mood. When I think of peace, I see a gentle wave lapping up a beach, the smile shared between a mother and her child. The silence of peace in the lack of hatred, war, and riots. One day, nations will come together and be as one, just as the Lord wanted it to be. We are all one people, put together in one world. When I think of peace, I see a better world for all of us. And we will now extinguish our chalice. We won't have the words on the screen, but I think you know the words. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again. So our service is now ending. You are invited to stay online and join a breakout room. And if you'd like to talk further with Reverend Anthony, stay right where you are.